Testing, making sure we are live. Let's see. Give me the 3, 2, 1 here. Okay, I can see me on YouTube, and it always works on Facebook. So happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. Hope your week was fabulous. Hope you're ready for Christmas if you celebrate. And yeah, I'm sipping on some Pinot Noir. Tonight's topic is actually plumbing, which I am terrible at. I will completely admit. So, Holly requested plumbing last week, and that's what we're going to chat about. I'll do my best, y'all. And I already have Kevin with me, Ray, Cheryl, and Holly, and I believe Dan is going to be here late if he can. He was swamped at work, but we will hope for the best. Let me make sure I can see your questions here. All right, and uh-oh, computer's freezing up, stupid thing. Okay, sorry guys, I'm waiting for this to refresh here. Computer's getting going kind of slow. Okay, now I can see him. Hey, Dylan's. Hey, Jerry Gunn. What are fry tubs? You're going to find out in a minute. Tubs of baby fish, I think. Okay. Hey, Salty. Jump in if you feel like it. And welcome to Dylan's. Everybody, welcome. Get your questions out for sure. And I'm thinking we kind of switch the roles up here. And Holly, you were the one that wanted the topic, so should we discuss fry tubs first, regular system? Where you want to go with it? Am I freezing?
Well, I have a tank right now that we're getting ready to plumb. It's actually a grow out tank for juveniles. So my husband Scott, that's here with me, he's getting ready to set that up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got an overflow box. I know last week talked to Dan a little bit. He'd say it was better if we drilled it out, in the middle and put pipes.
Yep.
But Scott got me an old desk for a stand that's going to go under it, like one of those big old metal desks that fits it perfectly. So we're going to do the sump on the side. So we're going to use that overflow box. So kind of need, we're going to have to, because it's got a big slot in it. I showed you guys last week. It's got a slot like this. So it's kind of wide. We're going to have to put some acrylic piece over it and put like teeth in it or holes or something, to make it safe and slow down the water.
Okay,
And
Holly, what you can do with that is get some plastic needlepoint mesh, and you can literally use basically some super glue gel and glue in the mesh over the hole, and then you won't have a problem with worrying about losing any of the youngsters going down the filtration. I use
now,
it in my
I
grow.
don't know about that, Cheryl. Like Dan was saying, because the slot is so big, he thinks the flow will be too fast through that slot.
You could use an acrylic rod even and brace it off. And I was put it halfway through where the slot is.
Wait, what did he say? We couldn't hear him.
He's saying it's going to be gravity fed, so it's going to flow into that slot.
Right.
Whatever we put in front of it, whether, it's the needle point or something to make the hole smaller and then the needle point over that. And then what were you saying? The pump will control the flow, right?
Yeah. Okay. Pumps control the flow, right?
So he understands it better than I do, obviously.
Yeah, you can literally glue in an acrylic rod across part halfway through that opening, and then put your mesh. Actually, I would put the mesh on the outside of that because the mesh eventually will get clogged up. And I do find myself having to I've got to use standpipes, but I still take out the standpipes and have to clean off the mesh periodically because it does collect detritus and some algae.
Now, how are you supposed to do that if it's glued on? The mesh.
Just pull it off and put another one on.
Okay. He already knows the answer. There you go.
Yeah, he knows how to do the steps. That's why I brought him, because he could translate for me what, he understands better. And the guy that sold it to me says if you use hot glue, you can remove it and replace it, right? And it doesn't, it's not permanent.
For that
Oh.
matter, you could actually use some acrylic rods,
Mhm.
build a container around the opening where you could slip in the mesh, and then you could,
Oh, good idea. Some
Oh.
little slots, and that way
and,
you can just.
and then you could pull it out to clean it, and it'd make it really easy. The thing is, you want to have something. You don't want to be fighting something to have to clean it.
You know exactly.
Coral
Yeah.
Vids also made a comment. He said the larger the overflow, the slower the flow going through any part of the overflow. And that Holly's husband, and he said, just don't damage the mesh, as the point of it is to have a uniform mesh size so that the fry don't go through it. Great tips. Makes sense. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you showed us.
And these will be bigger. They're not going to be the little fry in the tank. They're going
Right.
to be probably, the 2 to 5 inch size.
Yeah. The other thing you could do is actually drill into that overflow box, make some more holes, and that would slow your flow over the one ridge, which would
Oh,
be an
good
option.
point, Cheryl.
I've
Yeah.
done that also.
And I'm over here like, wait, it goes where? You're so lucky to have the husband, Holly. I tell you. Kevin, you've worked on complicated systems. Have you seen any other quick tricks for this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, the concern would be that if you're negligent in your maintenance, that the water level will increase and increase to a point, especially if you go away on vacation, even if you're away for a day, after feeding, that mesh can be mechanically blocked. And so your water level might increase. So you might want an emergency overflow. Some people have 2 overflow boxes, whether they're external, internal in their main displays. For reef aquaria, for example, you can do the same thing with a fry system. Just also be mindful that you don't want those fry to be stuck up against even the overflow mesh. So maybe it's something that's always dry, but there's an inch and a half or even an inch difference in the water depth. If that bottom one becomes blocked, then there's still room to save. And make sure that your mesh to begin with is quite tall, because then as the bottom bit gets dirty and the flow decreases through that bottom bit, the top part of that mesh is still there and relatively more clean.
Sounds perfect.
Makes sense.
Because it will get dirty.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
they do.
That's for sure.
What other questions, Holly? Now, or did we cover that good enough?
And
I think you're good, and you know the sumps and stuff you want, so it's just a matter of making
it's just
it
a
work.
matter of hooking it up and all that, and we did
But
that.
I think your idea of maybe a whole bunch of holes drilled in below where our drainage now is, and make this the overflow.
Well, I did that. I have a 59 that I took apart and put in a standpipe and a couple of sleeves. And I've got holes drilled and covered both at the top and then 2/3 of the way down on the bottom. So I've got a lot of openings for water to flow through, both at the top and the bottom. And that actually, I've never had a problem with it overflowing or getting clogged up, but then I keep an eye on it and keep it clean. But the more holes you have, the more you're going to diffuse your flow for the juveniles.
Hey, I just wanted to say, Salty Reef mentioned using a toothbrush to clean, and I wanted to say, Salty, thank you so much for the super chat. Mermaids Reef, thank you so much for the super chat. You guys are awesome. Merry Christmas to both of you too. Go ahead. What was the next thing you were going to say? Holly's husband.
Yeah, what were you saying just now? The spool thing? What were you mentioning?
Oh, I saw this one filter system that was on a spool, and it had 2 rolled up sections, and one fed into the other and kept cleaning it out as it went. So that may be an idea too.
I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen it either. Wait.
Is it an aquarium thing?
Oh yeah.
Everybody's talking mesh here, but Holly, you just said you're going to be using it for 2 to 5 month olds.
Roughly, yeah. Once they get onto frozen food.
You're not going to need something that small then, like a mesh.
No.
That's what I was thinking.
So you can use something that's big enough for most of that garbage to go through without trapping.
Cover the hole.
And you shouldn't have as much a problem. It'd be more like capturing it in a sock at the bottom of the overflow.
Well, Ray, she showed last week. Sorry to interrupt. She showed last week. The tank is just weirdly cut. Like it's got a big hole in the side. So
Here, take it over there and show you.
sure,
Let's
go ahead
see
and
if-
show.
Isn't that tank acrylic, Holly?
It's acrylic. It's actually, can you see now?
Let me try to make
Yeah.
you big.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Okay.
Right.
You could use something like gutter guard, or if you want something smaller, that craft stuff that they sell in the craft stores for, can't pick
Well,
up
the-
the word for
yeah.
it.
See, this tank, it was actually in a public aquarium. So it's got kind of a strange
Yeah, it's
thing
2
to
foot
it.
by 4
Wait,
foot.
hold still
inch-
for a minute because it's going all over the place. It's
Oh,
my
I was gonna
fault.
put
It's the internet.
computer back.
Well, what I'm thinking is, for that matter, if you're concerned about your flow, since it is acrylic, you could either drill it from the bottom or from the sides and add more overflows to it as well.
Well, see, we're putting a desk is going to be the stand.
And then I'm gonna have this drop straight into the sock on the sump.
Yeah.
Yep, and then just filter
Yeah,
fed. Yep.
so see, it's
Perfect.
got this huge box, and then that's on the outside.
Easy.
Yeah, that's what threw me. Like
Like
I've done
this,
overflows, but they're usually on the inside. So
Yeah. So it's on the outside, and it's got this huge slot. It's about an inch wide, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, still, it's a good deal. Good tank. You know.
Yeah. So we'll
Heavy
make
as
it work.
hell.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the plan, is making that work. And yeah, it's like, Ray was saying, it's not really for a little fry. It's for a little bit bigger guys. But
It's a grow out
like we
tank.
figured out how to size that slot. We can put stuff over at different sizes and change it as we need to for whatever size.
Yeah, if you
Seahorses are
decide
in
to
it.
use it for your babies, though, I like their idea of them.
Yeah.
You definitely keep that. That's a good idea.
So
Yeah.
is it 1/2 inch acrylic?
No,
It's
this is
an
like
inch.
inch thick.
Yeah. It's,
Got 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot.
Gotcha.
It's supposed to be 100-gallon, but I haven't
It's
done the
roughly
math yet.
100-gallon. It's like 17 inches tall inside, 2 feet wide, and 48 inches long.
Hey, Dylan's, I wanted to say really quickly that I know what you're talking about, and we will discuss fry systems, which would equate to dwarf systems. We will make sure to do that today, and the plumbing for that. But we're just talking bigger right now. We should have made that clear. Sorry. But go ahead, you guys. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm anxious to hear about that too.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to make sure, and I really appreciate you showing the system and how you plan to do it and all that. You said, so the sump is just going to be on the side on the floor. Is that what you're?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And that's how I have the one in my main tank, because my stand isn't tall enough for a sump to fit under it. So on my other tank, this sump is on the side and it works fine. And so we're going to do the same thing with this one.
I have had that set up in many tanks, and I'm just curious what you ever figured out for putting underneath the floor tank. Because everything.
I built another case for it.
Nice. Okay. See, I need one of those. I need one of those husband things. Darn it.
Yeah, he's a carpenter. That's his thing. So, so yeah, he built me. We actually bought. It was originally some kind of table that you would put like in your entryway or something,
Mm-hmm.
but it fit the measurements of the sump. And so what we did was, the bottom shelf of it that sits on the floor, I bought a yoga mat at Goodwill, which is made out of neoprene,
Mm-hmm.
and put that down. And then on top of that, went to the dollar store and bought these plastic mats like you use to cut vegetables and stuff on.
Oh yeah. Good.
Laid that on top of the neoprene, and then we put the sump on top of that.
Gotcha.
So
yeah.
waterproof underneath.
My
I
first
use
try.
log liners for that. Exactly.
And then
the same
the
reason.
table is over, so it's a table like this. It's over the top of the sump,
Mhm.
and to block the view of it, I set up a curtain, like just put a curtain rod on
Yep.
the table. and put a curtain that you open and close so you don't have to look at the sump all the time. I just open up that curtain. It's open on both sides so I can get to it from either side. And
Nice.
I open the curtain and I have full access to the sump.
And Kevin, I saw you said the foam. That's what I've always used, and it works. But I mean, I'm just apparently clumsy or too splashy or something, because when I'm clean, excuse me, when I'm cleaning, it gets pretty ugly. But it works for sure.
I make a mess. I put towels down all over the floor
Right.
when I'm doing water changes and stuff. But the sump is sitting, on a completely waterproof surface,
Right.
multi-layer.
No,
Yeah, the concern with some of the foams is that you don't want it to retain water.
Right.
The tank might be sitting on it; it will autocorrect for level, but you don't want any of that exposed foam or even the size of the foam to suck in water. You're just breeding all sorts of weird bacteria at that point. You want like a closed cell foam, even styrofoam, shipping containers. If you get something this holiday season and you have a bit of extra, put that underneath that, or else just never get it wet. That's the other concern.
Right. Absolutely.
Now,
Go ahead, Salty.
do you use anything on your walls to help protect from the salt creep?
My tanks are insulated with this stuff that you get at Home Depot. What is that called? It's an insulation. It looks like aluminum foil almost.
Yeah,
What do they call it? It's like bubble wrap.
it's like bubble wrap, but it's insulation.
But the main reason I use that is temperature control, a lot of it. But
Yeah.
it also, protects from everything.
Well, I'm going to need a little more details on that, because my answer, Salty, is no. I never was smart enough to do that, and I've destroyed multiple walls. Multiple. So the
Any
wall behind
latex-based paint
sorry.
would help, but the concern would be kind of where the wall meets the floor too. You might have a latex-based paint against the wall, and that would protect the wall, but as that water might run down, it's going to pool on that edge. So protecting that corner, at that point you can look at all sorts of different options for wet rooms. Depending on what climate you live in,
But
you
we
might
need
have
to
like a
put
buffer
this
room.
No, we're
with
gonna
that
cover
paint.
the top somehow. I'll get a sliding on the floor.
Excuse me.
But even like the back of the tank, water flows
Yeah,
down
no, that's
sometimes.
true.
I'm just talking about literally the wall behind the darn tank, period.
Yeah.
The wall behind my reef bubbled
Yeah,
up. It bubbled up, it cracked. Ooh, I'm going to have to pay for that.
Usually it's just the paint that does the bubbling and crackling, so
Sure.
you can repair that. For me, downstairs with the ab tank, I put up heavy industrial plastic even on the walls
Yep.
to protect it there. They're just tacked on with little, what do you call them, those little map pins.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just holding the plastic around. You don't really see it much, but it does protect. In my case, it's tongue and groove paneling.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my utility room where I have all the salt and the brine shrimp operation and pretty well anything else to do with salt other than the tanks, then the paint on that whole room is just wiped.
Right. Well, I've got to pull that video at some point and get it relabeled, because Ray actually took us downstairs and showed us his system, and it covered and enclosed in plastic, and it's also to keep cool air in, because abdominalis need cooler temperatures, and it's just a really cool setup. So I got to find that video and put it up. But he went the full mile. But
An
anyways,
experiment.
You
Go ahead.
remember more than I do.
I do, because it was cool. What were you saying, Salty?
I'm glad you brought that up. See, my display tank is not on a wall. It's kind of in the middle of the room. It's like a room divider.
Well, nice.
So it's not against a wall,
Right.
but this
They just
one,
have to protect the floor.
yeah. So this one will be. But Scott says the semi-latex paint is good for the water.
Well, I'm
It's
sure
not
he's
good
right.
for salt water. Salt water will eventually get at any paint.
Oh yeah.
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 So
That's why
Salty,
it's
what
better
do you
Yes,
suggest
you
then?
just have to keep
Just
paint
put
it.
the plastic over it,
Yeah, I know,
pin it
maybe-
up so it's higher than what the tank's going to affect, because the creep does get higher than what the tank's at. Don't ask me how, but it does. And then all the way down to the floor. You just cover it with plastic. You can even use an industrial garbage bag and open it up.
That's what
Send
I
a bunch
just
of
said.
those.
Ms. Queen, yeah.
Yeah. Good
It's not real
idea.
pretty though. Salty, I'm curious. You asked the question. Did you
No,
have a solution, or were you asking because you wanted to know?
No, I've been experimenting with something. Lowe's has, well, Lowe's in my area has it. It's like an industrial saran wrap
Yeah, yeah.
that I've used to coat the walls behind the tank and under the tank before I put the stand and everything together. And so far, it's been pretty successful. Like,
Good.
there's no damage, there's no nothing, and it's really cheap to replace. If
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Courtney, thank you so much for the super chat. Happy holidays to you. Thank you so much. And if you guys in the comment section, even if I don't call it, if you have a question, be sure to put it out there. If there's something about plumbing or anything else that you want to ask while we're all here, you guys know you can feel free to ask questions. And I know some of you are waiting for us to get to the tubs, but I wanted to make sure we covered all of Holly's questions. And frankly, guys, any other plumbing questions you guys might have or want to share about. But frankly, I had a plumbing issue, big, huge plumbing issue on my grow out Seahorse tank, right? I unfortunately plumbed it myself, which may have been the issue to begin with. But it was an SCA, I can't remember the exact name. It was a 90-gallon SCA tank, right? Big old thick thing. I ended up building a stand for it because I didn't have it, I didn't have anything that would work. I had to put the sump into like there was not enough room for the sump, so I had to like makeshift a sump. It was just a big mess. But within like a couple of months, something occurred where I had followed instructions. I think Salty was even the one that helped walk me through it. It might have been someone else. Anyways, I had followed instructions. It was my first drilled tank. And so doing the bulkheads and stuff in the I'm going to say these words wrong, guys. I'm terrible with plumbing. But in the where you have to screw the bulkheads in and underneath goes down to the sump, right? It started leaking. Is that just usually human error? Does that happen? What?
You know, Penny?
Your bulkheads were leaking or your connections were leaking?
Connections, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And were you using PVC pipe or were you using
I was
like
using
vinyl
PVC.
pipe?
Sorry, I was using PVC pipe with the little. I don't know plumbing, guys. The little 90-degree thingies.
Elbow?
Yes, thank you.
Says knock knock.
Kevin, what are you showing? Oh, I thought you were showing something. Oh, Seahorse Source is here. Yay. He'll know a lot more than I do about this stuff. Though
So
you guys are
elbows.
doing a great job. Elbows. Thank
90-degree
you.
elbows.
Thank you. You were trying to give me the hint and I didn't catch it. All right, here, Dan's welcome in.
When you're running a 90-degree elbow, you're putting a lot of pressure on that joint.
Mhm.
And what you can do,
Slider. You don't want to do 90.
I can't hear him.
Oh, come share, honey. Come share.
Yeah, 90 is too much of a corner. You'd rather do a slower corner, a bigger corner.
And you know what? Actually, now that you said that, I'm mixing up my fry tub in my 90 big tank. In the 90 big tank, it had like it was a drilled tank, so there was the box, and it went straight down, and all I needed it to do was curve into the sump, which was underneath. So I had it go straight down, and all of that stayed fine. Well, honestly, I'm not sure if it was actually leaking from the connector, the bulkhead where it connects to the box, or whether it was leaking somewhere else along the line. I could never figure it out. But bottom line is, it wasn't a 90-degree. It was more of a, whatever you call that one, the curvy one. But then it shot directly into a sock, into the sump, and it worked fine for a couple months and then just started leaking. I'm guessing it was human error. I just thought I'd throw it out there in case. I never did fix it. I ended up.
Usually PVC you glue together and it like melts the plastic together.
Right.
So if you've swabbed that out, it shouldn't leak.
So, I mean, do you
Yeah.
think it was the bulkhead then? Connection there?
Yeah, it must have been where you started or ended. Yeah, the connections.
Well, I will say this. I literally, because of the way that we built the desk, I had to like get up under there and I'm like in this tight space trying to, so it probably was that. I just I thought I'd throw it out there because anybody in the comments or watching that's had trouble with plumbing, I mean, that's what we're here for today. I got people in here that know what they're talking about. Not this girl, but you know, others.
Use an
Well,
extra glue.
the
That's
thing-
why I brought him.
The thing is, when you're putting it in a drain, you want to be as straight as possible going into your sump.
Right.
But you also have to watch out for your bulkheads, because if you don't get those cranked down tight, they are going to leak around the bulkhead, and it's going to look like it's running down the pipe down lower. You're not going to notice.
And
That's exactly how it was.
And
pressure of the box instead of the pressure of this box,
Mhm.
it won't be putting as much pressure through the hole.
Okay, husband's got to come by the mic because we can't hear him. We hear something sound, but not
Yeah.
him.
another misconception
Go ahead, Salty.
is, at least in the reefing side, a misconception is that you don't have to glue the overflow pipe because there's not enough pressure.
Mm.
I think that's wrong because it could leak.
Anybody
So,
ever
I
done
glue
one without
everywhere.
gluing? Okay, then. I think you're right, Salty. Okay, hey, Dan, welcome.
Hey,
Didn't give you much of an intro there, sorry. We've been
That's all right.
answering Holly's questions about her tank. We're just about to get to fry tubs, so perfect timing. But is there anything that you just see a lot happening as far as plumbing of regular tanks?
as far as what Salty was saying, I don't glue any of my gravity fed piping.
Really?
I do cut it straight. I use a cutter that cuts a nice straight cut, and then I bevel the edges and I put it in nice and tight. It's so tight, in fact, sometimes it's difficult to take them apart. It's very rare for me to have a leak on the gravity fed side. All my pipe coming from the pump that's under pressure, I do glue.
Yeah.
I
Me
that's
on
the way I do.
gravity fed, I don't glue mine either, but I get salt creep.
I don't get salt creep. I get a nice tight fitting the way that I cut the pipe and bevel it.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm gonna attempt to fix that right now. I see exactly what you're talking about. This happened another week. Just feel free to keep talking, guys.
Kevin's trying to make things bad for us people that are putting up with snow.
No, oh, with his background.
It's coming tomorrow.
Sorry, trying to do two things at once. Sorry for the. Let me see if this works. It's one of them I got to turn off, and I can never remember which one. Well,
Ultimately, I think, like Dan was saying,
okay.
if your maintenance is good enough, you can just look out for that salt creep. If you want to be a member of the LARS, the Lazy A Reefers Society,
Right.
then you can just totally neglect everything and do it really lazy. But do it right, or if you pay a lot of attention to everything and every aspect of your system. Then every day, just take like a wet cloth and with RO water and just wipe down the plumbing. Also, just look for any leaks that you might have every single day.
Oh, yeah.
You can get those water alarms. A lot of different manufacturers sell these things. They might, the whole point is to be loud and obnoxious as soon as they get wet. You put one under your tank and it just beeps and wakes you up. All sorts of different options to warn you about
Nice.
dangers. Might scare all the rest of your animals in your house.
Right. Hey, Mermaid's Reef said bulkheads can leak if they're over tightened. That could be it too, because I was so afraid it wouldn't be tight enough that I was using, I'm not going to know the name of the tool, but something to tighten it, better than my hand. So bottom line is Kelly should never plumb a tank. That's it. End of that story. And 16 Mystified said, I have an all-in-one tank. I don't have any additional plumbing. There's always that, man. I mean, that works. Sometimes most Seahorse keepers like sumps, and I think most reef keepers do too, just because you can get more filtration and etc. in it, but it's much easier to have an all-one. I'll definitely go with that. And Dylan said, so since this is my first saltwater tank, I got an all-in-one. I'm saying, right? You can still do it in an all-in-one for sure. And Mermaid's Reef, you're going to be sad if your rain doesn't turn to snow. Booyah! Keep that snow. I don't want it here. Okay. All right. Now I'm done with questions. Go ahead.
Sorry, Ray, this isn't a live feed, but to get back to the bulkheads, if you do buy bulkheads, even if you go back to the same outlet that you bought it from, Home Depot, every single time, I've had the manufacturing country of that same UPC, of that same bulkhead change. And therefore, the outside diameter of that same internal diameter bulkhead might be different as well, just because of the way that they make the flange that goes on the outside. So if you have a caliper, or you can read, if you have a measuring ruler or anything, just get that outside diameter. And your hole only needs to be just bigger than the outside diameter, so you could pass the bulkhead through, and that gives you the most space, the most surface area for that seal of that bulkhead to press against the tank. You don't want to make it too big, because then you have less of that seal, less of that contact to compress.
Really good point. And I know Cheryl made a point earlier, and I think Kevin just did. The last thing I have to ask about plumbing in a regular tank is just Kevin was just talking about how you can use the contraptions to let you know if the water's going to cause problems. Cheryl mentioned 2 dual overflow boxes. How often is it that people take these precautions? Because I'll admit, I wasn't. So, I mean, we've got these reefers that have all this equipment and things that are telling them every time anything happens. But in Seahorse tanks, does anybody have those extras usually?
I mean, extra parts?
Just no, like extra
overflows.
safety measures.
Alarm system type stuff. No,
Right.
only for my temperature, because I have the that bird thing. I forget what it's called. Something bird that tells me if the temperature is too low or too high.
Inkbird.
Inkbird, yeah.
Ink bird, yeah.
Ink
Thank
birds.
you. The some kind of bird.
Those
But
were-
no, not for the water. But that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean it's hard when you first start a tank. It's like, oh my gosh, now I gotta buy this. Oh my gosh, I gotta buy that. But I'm sure like the people in here will be the first to tell you, do it right first, so you don't have to have a lot more money problems fixing it. And Salty, do you see it more? Do you see more precautions being taken in the reef side, or?
Yeah, I would say the reef side is definitely more precautious than the Seahorse side.
Gotcha. Well, maybe we need to change that, y'all. But Dan, is the reason that you don't have all those contraptions usually, or those safety measures, is because you know your system, it works, and you're on top of it every day? Is that?
That's a part of it. There's also the fact of, I've had to try to keep every cost measure I can in place in order to turn a profit. So,
Right.
things that were necessary, we did. And sometimes we tried to do without things and later had to add them in. I would have liked to have had more check valves on all my systems than I did, but, and I would have loved to have all kind of alarms, but when you've got 30 different systems to put it on, it gets expensive.
Absolutely. Kevin, last
Cool.
question for you. Are most of the I don't want to say failures, but most of the problems you see on in the forums and stuff like that, are they usually because someone wasn't taking extra precautions, or was it just could they be
Yeah,
resolved? Go ahead.
usually you have you gain trust in your hardware and your own schedules, and it's when something all in that changes that the problem occurs. So you're about to go away, so you add something new to your tank to prevent something from happening, and then that's the cause of a failure or of an overflow or something. It's either something that you change right away and it's failing quite soon, or something that's been fine forever and then fails. Very rarely is it after right up like a month or two into it. So just be mindful if you're about to add an extra filter, a mechanical filter that could end up getting clogged really easy, or whatever it is. Make sure you're constantly checking it, and then you start gaining that trust in your ability to install it correctly, or to have operating correctly, or for it not to clog, and then your ability to clean it. So you understand the time and the effort required into maintaining it. So that's what I see. People are like, oh, I added a new mechanical filter on my tank,
Right.
in my sump or in my overflow, and it clogged way too quickly, and my tank overflowed and my sump went dry, and then I lost everything, and then my tank was on the upstairs level, and then it overflowed into my floor, and then it destroyed my carpet downstairs, all sorts of craziness. So
Actually, sincerely, that's what happened. Not exactly, but in my Barbori tank, it did not have a sump. It had a canister filter, and I was so darn worried that, we were going on vacation. I had my significant other's mother, who, is, not into fish. We'll just say that, coming to check and do things. And I was so worried that I added a second filter, and like in the instructions, she somehow got confused and ended up, instead of having both filters working, turning them both off. And I lost my Seahorses. It sucked. So not exactly the same, but, I'd say the biggest thing I see, especially again on the reef side, but is tanks overflowing. I know in my reef, one of the main things that I'd be like, oh crap, because I didn't have an auto, what do they call them, guys? Auto top off. And so if I was slacking or forgot to add water, it would get too low, the pump would start blah, 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 and it would start, the tank water would go up, and it was really, so auto top off is something, I know that's not technically plumbing, but I'd say it's something that needs to happen if you're not going to stay on top of it, or if you have a situation where the water lines are really close, that much is going to do it for you. Anything else, you guys? I don't want to keep rambling about it, but anything else about regular tank plumbing? I know we got to cover.
Well, and for Holly's situation, Holly, if you were to build some sort of weir or container to go in front of that slot, just be mindful that you may not notice water kind of creeping in from wherever that seal might be, but you want to make sure that the volume of water above the lowest point in that hole is capable of flowing into that sump, because even if the power flickers for a minute or two, that's enough for the volume of water above that lowest point to drain. Now, if you accidentally even have something below it when you think it's sealed, make sure it's actually sealed, because that's just dripping or trickling out over time. That might just be enough to overflow the sump. So turn off the electricity to your system, watch it drain, mark that level on the sump that is your max fill level, because then you need that extra volume above that level to be able to accommodate a power outage, and that's true for
I
any
use a
system.
Sharpie, and all my sumps are marked.
Yep.
Yeah, backflow too.
Backflow, yeah.
Yeah, so Dan just mentioned a check valve. Those are expensive, and you can have siphon breaks in there too. There's all sorts of ways to stop that backflow from going on. In those traditional kind of old school U returns with the power jet or the nozzle in front, there's always a little siphon hole that usually just kind of trickling out water. But the reason that's there is when the power goes off, so that it doesn't all go back down.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. One last thing on the flange on the bulkhead, it usually comes with a rubber washer.
Yep.
If you rub Vaseline on it, oil and water don't mix kind of thing. And always do plumbing just hand tight.
Nice.
If you've done it right, hand tight it'll work.
I've never heard the Vaseline thing. Very good tip. I like it.
I use silicone lubricant instead.
There you go.
Same thing they use on pool filters.
It creates a seal, a little barrier for the water to fight through. It usually won't.
Well, there you go. Every time I set up a tank, y'all got to just come do it for me, because woo. All right. But no,
when you have to walk away from a house, you usually want to do it right the first time.
Absolutely.
Under the not fun.
I'm curious too, do all of you use adjustable pumps? I know I'm kind of veering off from the actual plumbing, but it's so key to me. I'd never go back to a pump that wasn't adjustable. Do you guys all use adjustables?
Yeah.
So that you can control
I
the
do.
flow?
Never had one.
That's the one Dan recommended, I believe.
So Ray, you just determine what flow rate you want for the tank,
I'm
and
using
then
the same ones I used on my reefs 30 years ago.
Nice.
awesome.
They're still running. I got
Now
the
that's
same
something.
power heads I started with.
That's something people can't usually say too. That's pretty decent when you got something running that long. But anybody watching, I'm going to tell you, Ray got lucky, or he just got some really good old school products. Change your equipment.
I have a fit looking at the prices of power heads today.
Right.
Just can't believe the prices on them.
Yep. Do
The
you
ones I
guys?
paid, the Hagen 802s that I bought when I first bought them, they were like $25 Canadian.
Mhm.
And I had a fit when they, the last one that I bought was $44. And I think that was in 95.
Jeez.
And
Wow.
I don't have all of the pumps that I had. I used to have 30 odd 802s,
Right.
but I'm probably down to about 19 now.
Mhm. Well,
But,
and
Answered.
Holly, I
Yeah.
saw your pump. I think that I'm pretty sure those are the exact ones that
Yeah,
I
the
use
DC
also.
pumps.
And I'm just, yep. I'm curious from any of the rest of you that would say change equipment, how often should people, obviously Kevin and Dan have both said very clearly you should be checking every day, period. You should be looking at everything every day. But is
Agreed.
there, an accepted amount of time that you're supposed to go ahead and change out your equipment? And do you ever have to worry about plumbing? Or is that good for
Well,
the long?
Yes.
preventative maintenance is a concern. So you want to make sure that the intake of those pumps are clean. They might
Mhm.
have a particle filter, mechanical filter. To answer Jerry's question, yeah, DC pumps are the ones that are adjustable. You could take an AC dumb pump that has just a constant flow depending on the head pressure and have a T or a water line coming off of it to make a closed loop, whether it's just to slow it down or to actually have some sort of other filtration. But yeah, you want to make sure that, especially if you have a lot of live rock that you brought into your tank, you can have all sorts of benthic invertebrates that are sitting there and growing in your plumbing and growing in your system and growing in your sump. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not in there.
Right.
I've had bioballs get stuck in the inlet of pipes, and then that in turn traps hair, and then that was
Oh.
actually trapping lanthanum chloride in that system, and then calcium was building up on that, and then the pump overheated, and
Ah.
then the tank got too hot, and then the PVC fused together, and then there was an electrical problem, and then that's how we found out about it.
Oh my
So
gosh.
just make sure that you always look, and you can hear something is wrong, but then you shouldn't even get to that point because you should be always doing some preventative maintenance. Now the frequency that you should be doing the maintenance is, first of all, like we mentioned earlier, you don't want to be difficult to get to. You want everything to be able to that you need to clean frequently be really accessible so that you actually do it. You don't want something hidden behind something just because you can move a tank when it's empty. You obviously can't move a tank when it's full, so make sure you have things accessible. And there's a balance between making it look good and making it accessible. I understand, but whether it's the checking the intake of a pump every month or every week, you don't have to be doing that every day. But if you do have something that's loose or that can swim over and overflow and into your sump, and then potentially block a sump, just be mindful of that kind of stuff. But you guys know your systems just like your houses and your relatives. You can tell when something is wrong. So.
No, absolutely. And great point about placement because I made that mistake more than once for sure. In the reef
The-
tank I told you guys about with the bubbling wall. Yeah, absolutely. But so, I mean, like, and I wasn't looking for an exact answer. I'm sure there isn't one. Kevin's right, your tank. But is there, like, annually you should switch out and get a new pump? Every 10 years. I know they give
No,
warranties, but go ahead, Dan.
no. The proper thing to do is to periodically do maintenance on your pumps, take them
Right,
apart and
right.
clean them.
Yep.
We didn't do it that way. That would be the proper way to do it. What we did instead was we had extra pumps and we had a problem. We just yank a pump, replace it with a different pump, and then do the maintenance or whatever needed to be done to it. We went to all DC pumps, variable speed, and it wasn't because old pumps failed. Our switch was because of the cost of electricity. Our payback was less than a year by switching out the pumps and the savings on electricity with the pumps.
Nice.
We liked the ability to put bigger pumps in. So if later we wanted to, change something, we had more flow because with the DC pumps, you can dial them back.
Great points. Yep. And I mean, all of this,
What
any other,
about
oh, sorry, go ahead.
what about actually cleaning out the pipes annually?
Yeah. How often do pipes need to be cleaned? Great question.
Well, if you look at a production system, they look really, really, really nasty inside because of all the organics. What we did was we had rigged up a brush on a kind of a semi-rigid cord that we just would push through and clean them. We didn't do it on any type of set schedule. We bleached our systems fairly regularly every time the fry batch was done, but on my other tanks, which were up much longer, I would periodically, and I don't remember what I didn't have a schedule. Just when I looked in there and saw they were getting junky, I would clean them out.
Hey Lisa, I know you're one of those awesome chicks that knows her plumbing. So give us some questions or some info anytime you want. And Merry Christmas to you too.
Like,
Go ahead, Salty. Sorry.
what I use is a bottle brush attached to a metal coat hanger, and I run that through every 6 months, and it seems
Nice.
it brings out a lot of nasty gunk.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Just like
it's a
Kevin was
little
saying
different.
earlier. Huh?
It's a little different when you're not doing it on a commercial basis.
Right.
Most of my pumps, they're old Marineland pumps that I got over 15 years ago, and they all still work. And they are
Nice.
adjustable. But it's one of those things where I take them apart on a regular basis, thoroughly clean them,
Yep.
and put them back in. And that is one of the keys to keeping a pump going long term.
Truth. And I just want to know what the heck happened to the quality of products these days. My goodness. I mean,
Well,
Cindy came on recently and showed us some equipment with the company she's working with. It is actually giving like 10-year guarantees and stuff, which is awesome. But man, I've gotten some things that just are gone in 6 months. It's just terrible. So
these pumps came with a lifetime warranty and were
nice.
manufactured in Italy.
Nice.
You can't. They don't make them anymore.
Nice. Gotcha. Well, that's a bummer for us, but for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, the flow is adjustable on them,
Yes.
but it's not It's not easy like with the DC pumps.
Right. Doesn't have the controller
I have
probably.
to stick my hand in and adjust them.
Right. I hear you. I hear you. And we could talk all night, guys. I gotta get to fried ups. And Kevin, I wanted to ask really quickly. We love when you join us, but were you joining just for fun, or was there anything you needed to shout out or anything?
Oh, there's a meetup in February, but yeah, just joining in today.
Okay, awesome. Well, guys, we will talk a lot more about the meetup in February. We're going to do the Seahorse and Pipefish, and we're going to do the women and reefing. But we'll talk a lot more about that later. I just wanted to make sure he didn't have any sort of announcement. Okay, so Dan, Cheryl, any of you, really, who wants to start us off on, like, just by saying the goal of the fry tub, and then, of course, I've got pictures of Cheryl's system. I did link the video, but, like, we do want to cover the tubs because that's what everybody's asked about and wants to do. And we've talked recently, but I want to talk again a little bit about, if you don't want to do the tubs and you do a regular tank, what you can do there. And if Dan can still hear me, hopefully he can show us those pictures of his regular tanks that he plumbed for fry, because a lot of people try using the smaller tanks. I know that Holly, you were doing that. Are you still using the really small tanks and just cleaning them every day?
Oh, for me,
Yes.
on my fry tank right now, I use different tanks depending on how many fry I have.
Right.
So currently I have a 10-gallon and a 3-gallon go. I just had more fry born
Oh, yay.
last Friday, but there was only 16 of them.
Huh.
So I put them in a 3-gallon.
He's
Gotcha.
taking a break.
30 that are almost converted to frozen that are living in a 10-gallon, and they're going to need to move into a bigger tank soon.
Gotcha. I'm going to interrupt real
Or
quick to
we
say,
have to split
hang
them
on.
out into 2 10s and a 12 or something if we don't get stuff going in time for them.
Absolutely. And that's, you might, if you ever look, I mean, you asked about the tubs before, so we'll talk about it. But
I got Scott here because he's going to help me do it. So
absolutely. Kevin, are you trying to say something?
If you get the tubs,
Okay.
you're going to find they're much easier to clean. They are partially self-cleaning. Thank you.
What just happened?
And they also, you will find that the fry tend to do much better in them because you have a circular flow. There's no corners for the fry to get trapped in, and they can orient directly into the flow and glean food without expending a lot of energy in prey capture.
All right, sorry. Okay, and Dan, are you showing us the tubs? Why did it disappear? Hang on.
Yeah, Dan is showing a bottom or fry tank that has like a trickle flow spinning in a counterclockwise direction just to get some, I'm sure some of that debris off of the ground. And then also it's got a standpipe in the middle, but the overflow water comes from the bottom and then probably goes up the outside of the flow of the standpipe and then back down the middle. So that's capturing a lot of the organics that are falling onto the ground, or at least collecting them if it can't suck them against that mesh screen on the bottom.
Yep.
Dan, if you want to comment, I'm sure you're
Yeah,
sharing your screen, but we can't see you.
Yeah, you're correct in everything you're saying so far. It is a trickle flow because you don't want to flush the food out. Even with the trickle flow, though, you can see on the bottom that everything moves towards the center of the tank, which makes it easier for when it comes time to clean, especially when you have tiny fry in there. Like in this case, there's some newborn fry. The tank itself is a koi show bowl, and that's about 25 gallons in size. And that's one of the smaller tanks. Um, I'll show you in a minute. I have some of the parts here on my person that I can show you the other parts, but let's see.
These are the
This is,
WLM, it looks like, Dan.
I'm sorry?
The WLM Koi show bowls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can make this bigger.
Doing great here, guys.
This
Um,
is Dan cheating. Notice the one on top.
Yes, in fact, most of mine just have a outer sleeve that goes over the standpipe for the water to drain at the bottom. In this case, I built one on top because it was getting clogged so quickly that it acted in case as a backup so the tank wouldn't overflow. Um, but basically, it's the same concept. The difference is this is a 90-gallon tub instead of one of the small koi bowls.
Are
And
these
the
Erectus?
uh, I don't know because I don't have a date or don't have notes on what picture that is. I got so many of them. It looks like there's about 600 fry in that particular tank. Um, but that's basically the same thing. But when I do those, the koi show bowl is much smaller, and you can see here in this picture. Um, whoops, I get full screen. Come on, there we go.
Oh, he does his sump.
So here I have multiple tanks on one sump, and I had a rack of looks like I had 6 tanks on that rack originally, and I took 3 of the tanks off and put a koi bowl there. The problem with these bowls, they do take up more stake than rectangular tanks, but the plumbing on a glass tank or a acrylic tank can be the same way. Just like I have the plumbing for the center flow on the round tank, I have the same thing over here on the glass tanks. And of course, in this particular setup, I have all the tanks going to one universal sump. Um, Now, as far as how the pipes work, did I come off screen share?
You did,
Yeah.
Yeah, you did,
and I'm
Dan.
curious as
Yeah.
you get it back up. Did you like the universal sump thing, or did you go steer away from that?
Well, on a small system where I have small amounts of fry, that was fine. With multiple small batches, but when I have big batches, I want to have them each on their own independent system. So basically, let me get in the screen here. This is a bulkhead,
Here, wait.
and
Let me make you big if I can. Sorry, it takes me a second. I'll make you big, and now you are
Not big yet.
not big. I'm trying to get there. Add spotlight. Okay, and get you off spotlight, Holly. Taking up the space. Just kidding. Okay, and now you're.
There we go.
I'm sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
all right. So figure out which way I'm going here. This is a bulkhead, and I bought, I don't know, 50 or 100 of them when I first started, and I figured out that a 2-inch piece would go over it nicely. But first of all, it takes a 1-inch standpipe, so the standpipe goes in, and then I take a 2-inch piece of pipe to go over it with a fitting on the bottom. And so basically, what happens is this is the top part here of the flange is sitting at the bottom of the tank, and then I slide a pipe over it. So now what happens is water has to come in through the bottom, goes up between the 2 pipes, and then down the pipe in the center. And the way that I did mine, this one has window screen on it. I simply take a Dremel tool and I cut out the bottom of a straight connector, and that in turn just fits on the bottom of the pipe. And in this case, I use window screening. And the way that I adhered the window screening was I took PVC glue with a Q-tip and simply, painted it on there. And for window screening is roughly 1,000 by 1,200 microns in size. So for the very first week of fry or pelagic fry, I also have a finer screen, which on there it looks like it's clear, but that's actually 670 microns of, it's a white screen. So it's a much smaller screen. And I found that cutting out on the PVC was better to do the big squares, because when I went and tried to just drill holes and cover it, I don't get as much flow through when I want to crank the flow. So the more open area, the better in terms of getting the flow through the tank. And then I also had one of my tanks in which I couldn't use the standpipe, so I had to have the flow from the top. So I made something very similar, and this is it's actually a 3-inch piece of PVC, so that I have more surface area so the fry don't get stuck as well. And I had to use that on my fiberglass tubs where I didn't have a bulkhead fitting. It was prefabbed, and I didn't have a good seal for the bulkhead.
But you still put screen over the holes in that too, right?
Yes, that has
Okay.
screen. You don't see it on here because
Right.
it's white, but there's 670 micron screen on there.
And when I went
And
to, oh, go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to ask, I'm going to ask Dan a question that's leading for Natural Blues question. But Dan, I imagine you have various heights of that inside standpipe so that you can just swap those out and have different depths of water in whatever tank you want, and that's not glued into that bulkhead. Is that right?
That is correct. In fact, if you look at this picture here, you see basically this pipe isn't all the way up. This was a 65-gallon fiberglass tub, and this one I didn't use a bulkhead because it had a fiberglass in bulkhead, and that's where I used the bigger piece. This was a dwarf tank. But yeah, I could, in some cases, if we wanted the tank to be lower, the inside pipe, the 1-inch pipe that comes out of the bulkhead, controls what the level of the water is going to be. So
And
my outer sleeve went all the way up. They were all cut the same length. They went up above the tank.
I think something that Beeves Reef just mentioned, that I don't have a Dremel tool, Dan, but I do have a saw, or not a saw, a drill bit. And I've seen banjos. I'm not sure if you have any handy, but you can just cut a sliver of pretty wide, like 2 or 3 inch diameter PVC, and then just tap a hole on the side. And that way, because you don't what Dan's doing here is he's dremeling out the sides of connectors or reducers. And that's a lot of work. And I'm sure Dan needs to do that for his production facilities, but you can then glue mesh to the sides of a PVC cut.
Yeah, I
You
saw he
could.
said it's a lot of work, but I mean, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
It is a little bit of work, but I got to where, after I did it once or twice, it would take me about 10 minutes to do it.
Okay.
But you could also drill a hole and take a coping saw and do it too.
Okay. Yeah.
There's multiple ways to do it, but the idea is to create as much of an open area so you have as much flow to go
Surface
through there. If there's just a bunch of tiny little holes, you're not going to get enough flow if you want to crank the flow in the tank.
Right. And with the window screen, because I set up these tubs myself, guys, he's explaining it perfectly. But when I set up 2 smaller ones because I didn't have those huge batches of fry, so I just had 2, I think 20-gallon tubs that went to a 1 sump. And Beeves, also this is for fry or dwarf seahorses. So if you're looking to get in with Ryan and Dee and do larger seahorses, this is a totally different setup. But anyways, when I went to get the window screen, I ran into the problem of figuring out which are treated and which aren't.
I just bought fiberglass screen, period.
Okay.
And I didn't see where on the labeling where it said it had been treated, and I never paid any further attention to it than that, and I never had issues.
Okay, so you put the standpipe in. If you have a 1-inch hole, 1-inch standpipe, then you have the 2-inch cover with the holes at either the top or the bottom covered with screen. How is the water getting into the tank?
The water is getting into the tank from the 2 pipes up above. On most of my systems, I have 2, but my standard sump setup, this happens to be a 20-gallon long, but it's either a 20-gallon long or a 30 breeder. And on the far right, I have a pump, a variable speed pump that pumps water up. It goes through a cartridge filter, which is directly above it. Coming out of the cartridge filter, it goes into a T. Part of the water goes down to um, a bioreactor with a coldness media down below, and then the rest of it goes up to the top with a manifold. In this case, there's a 3-tank system, so there's 3 tanks up above it. Um, and then the water coming down um, drops down into a manifold again and goes into a filter sock, and um, the process starts all over. Now, of course, I have a skimmer in the sump, but basically, I go from the pump up to my cartridge filter to a T, where part of it returns to the sump and part of it goes up to the tanks. And by having that T in place, you can go with it. It doesn't matter what type of pump you use. You can adjust the flow within by using controlling the flow and which way it goes between on the T, whether it goes to the tanks or back to the sump.
Right, and you have what on it to stop the backflow? I can see it in the picture, actually.
To stop the backflow,
Yeah.
I really don't have anything to stop the backflow on that one.
Okay, maybe I don't see. I thought the little connection piece. I can't think of the darn word, but what
No,
do you?
it's just coming from the pump into the canister and then into a T. I got multiple valves in place, but I don't have a backflow preventer.
No,
There's no check valve there.
that's the word. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no.
Sorry.
But I do notice, Dan, that I think a lot of your valves there, and maybe even your T's, are all threaded. And I noticed that on your on the koi ball you had when you took 3 tanks out, you had all that plumbing threadable, so that you can kind of take it apart and reuse it or reassemble it in different orders.
Yeah, I retooled the whole place 3 times over the years, and every time I experiment with something, I got frustrated having to throw pipe away. So it was more expensive to put a bunch of threaded pieces in, but anywhere where I can do threaded, I prefer to do that just so that if I decide to modify it, I can reuse the material.
Beeves Reef is in the comments saying he's going to do dragons. Man, that was my dream forever. I can't wait to see it. Please, please share when you do. I'm sure you will, but that would be exciting. Anyway, sorry, Dan. Okay, so great explanation. When it gets back up to the tank, why are so it's going from the T into the tank at 2 sides. Why are they curved? Like, why are they angled? I know I'm not asking properly. Why are they angled into the tank at an odd?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Couple of things. Well, first of all, the reason that they're angled up at the top, where it goes into the tank, right before it goes into the tank, one is to get in a position where I want it, but number 2 was what I really should have done was gotten some lock line to help slow down the speed of the flow, so it wouldn't create as much of a spin. If you look at any pictures Alyssa does of her system, she put lock line on all of hers, which would be a better way to go. I did it the cheaper way. I just would put pieces on the end to slow up the flow so I wouldn't have as much of a spin in the tank. And in the picture that I have showing right now, if you'll notice, my lines coming to the tank are all up above the water level. So in the case of a power failure, this tank will not drain down.
Nice.
Alyssa has hers one on the bottom, which helps a lot with the sediment on the bottom, but she also has check valves on all of her tanks.
Gotcha. And you said you want to control the flow in the tank and make sure it's not too much of a spin, but you want spin. Can you tell us why you want spin?
Well, you want spin because as the tank rotates around, first of all, it's your circulation, but also it keeps the detritus moving towards the center where it gets picked up and goes into the sump and to the filtration. Now, when it's at a trickle, it doesn't matter so much, but what you don't see is me cranking the flow up at nighttime. And a lot of times what I'll do at night, because I crank it fairly hard, is on one of those outlets, I'll put a 90 on it so that I can crank that side up harder than the other side and get a lot of turnover without having it spin 50 miles an hour.
Okay, and I don't mean to be asking all the questions, guys. You can always ask away. And I'm sorry it keeps doing this weird double screen thing. I'm trying to make it stop. But anyways, I just have a couple more. So when you're trying to figure out what kind of pump to put on this system, how do you determine that? Like what?
Well, there's actually some, if somebody was to pull the engineering books, you could actually sit down and calculate it out based upon your head pressure with the amount of pipe, the number of fittings, what type of fittings and all that stuff.
Right.
We did it the way most hobbyists do it. We put a pump on there and said, yeah, that's too much or that's not enough, and
Right.
did a different one. And once we figured out what we wanted, it was almost all my systems are pretty much the same. In fact, if you look at this sump, the setup in that sump is basically the same as any of the others. Um, but it's, once we knew what size pump, we could just go with that pump. The other way to go is go with a variable speed pump. And with a variable speed pump, if you have
Mhm.
too much, you just turn it down.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And just looking at the seahorses, is there any, like you said, obviously oh, that's too much flow. Oh, that's not enough. Is there any kind of description as to what you should see the seahorses doing, and then you know it's good?
I'm
Like
sorry,
should
one more time.
sorry. So oh, that's too much. They're flying around the tank. Oh, that's not enough. The Artemia is able to do whatever. Is there any kind of visual that you could give someone, like when I see the fry moving at this rate, or they can swim against, or whatever? Is there anything like that that can give someone who's never done this before an idea of, okay, my flow's good now?
Well, in the daytime when they're feeding, they should be pretty much um, in a circular type system. They're almost motionless facing into the flow feeding.
Okay.
They'll slowly be swimming around. Once they hitch at night, like those plastic chains that I have, which are electrical ties, those are usually sitting at about a 45-degree angle at nighttime when I turn the flow up because of the spin and the current going around and around in the tank.
Gotcha. Okay. And did someone speak?
Well, one thing I noticed with the fry too is particularly when we're working with the pelagic fry, as they get older, I find that if they're starting to go around and actually hitch to the flow, the pipe or the flow, it's time to turn up, definitely increase the flow in the system.
Hmm.
And it's one of the criteria I use when I'm working with like combs.
Gotcha. Okay, and then with things going the way they're going, if we want to get in, if you guys want to get into, well, we're sticking to plumbing today. Okay, so how often should you be cleaning your top of the standpipe, cap over the whatever you call it, with the window screen?
As it gets clogged up, in some cases, some tanks we did it twice a day. Sometimes we did it once a day, and in some tanks we do it every couple of days. But it was on a regular basis. What we did was we built extra um, sleeves to go over that standpipe. So we would just pull one, stick another one on, and throw it in the sterilization barrel and sterilize it, and have it back in play to go again.
Gotcha. Hey, Cheryl can't see the comments. Lisa said she misses you guys so much, and loves us all. Mwah. Okay. Anyhow, what other questions, guys, about plumbing in this fry tank or other? I do want to, kind of go over what you do if you wanted to plumb a smaller one. Dan, do you have those pictures too?
And
Well,
one thing that I know you didn't mention, I'm sure you're running airlines in these tanks. Is that correct?
that is correct. But what I usually did with airlines was I put
Right.
one of these in,
Exactly.
and this is basically it's a sweep up top from the electrical section of PVC that I have connected, and I have the airline coming in the bottom, and it comes up and comes around, and I have it where it's half in and half out of the water, and that adds to my circular movement when I have the flow turned down real low, so that I can keep a spin up. Um,
Exactly.
and it also pulls water from the bottom back up to the top.
Not fry tanks, Beeves. In a regular seahorse tank, sure, they like flow, maybe not slamming into walls, but fry especially, you gotta slow it down because you need them to eat and not splat on the sides and stuff. But yeah. So is there any other way, guys, to describe the rate of flow that you're usually going to see in a fry tub? I think you guys have done a good job. But for anybody who does say, hey, I thought seahorses loved high flow, why is it different with fry?
I want the fry to be able to orient into the flow and glean food and not get knocked around the tank. If they're getting pushed back and they're having to swim back around or struggling to swim into the flow, I need to reduce the flow. And then I'll gradually increase it as they get larger and mature.
There's
Expending
two
energy,
other
right?
reasons too,
Go ahead,
right?
Dan.
The energy factor is one. You don't want them to be exerting too much energy. You want that energy to be put towards growth. And the second thing is that if you have too high a flow, you're going to wash out the food source.
Oh yeah.
And we're dumping artemia in there, and the artemia will go through into the filtration. So if we have high flow in there, we're just going to wash out the food.
Gotcha. Okay, guys, what
Which can
other?
come in handy.
Well, at nighttime, that's the purpose of turning up the part of the purpose of turning up the flow is to flush out all the uneaten artemia so you can put new artemia in.
And not exactly plumbing. Well, it's still plumbing. Do you, Cheryl, in the video that I linked already, guys, in the comment section, Cheryl uses K1 media reactors. We've said before you don't have to do that, but Dan, what's that all about?
Well, the K1 media reactors are just to me, it was an efficient way to set up the biological portion of this. I don't have live rock or anything like that. I can sterilize the media, and that's a picture of it here. I can sterilize it very easily, and it has a high surface area. And my fry tanks, for example, with the K1 and this is a 3-gallon water jug that I just drilled holes about quarter of the way from the top, and the water coming in the top stirs the media up. So it works almost like an upside down fluidized filter. It's got, instead of having sand that sinks, this case, the media floats. So in the case of a power outage, it doesn't go out as quickly. Um, but to give you an idea, that jug right there will handle a quarter of a pound of food per day.
Wow, so cool. And Cheryl, you make your own reactor, but you plumb in the reactor, correct?
I did, but I had a bunch of old skimmer bodies that I hated. So I gutted the skimmer bodies, drilled them, and turned them into K1 media reactors. It was just what I had laying around, and it works.
Yep.
Now, I would like to say that,
Yes.
this was what I ended up settling on doing. And part of it was influence from a local hatchery and somebody else that was in aquaculture when I first started that was giving me a hand. But there's many, many different ways to set up your filtration and your biomedia in the sump. Some people will use other products, and there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Right.
This just happened to work very well for our needs, and it was easy to sterilize. And one of the key things with a fry system is you want to be able to sterilize the system between uses.
Absolutely. So Holly, you gonna do the tubs?
Yeah, eventually I will. Yeah, it's definitely on the menu.
Well, I'm curious, and Dan, if you have it, I definitely want to see the picture of the square tanks plumbed too. But go through the pictures as you feel and talk as you feel. But Holly, what are the questions you have, like as you're looking at possibly doing this at some point?
Well, I don't so much because actually Scott will be doing it. He took a look, he was watching at the beginning and he got it.
Okay.
And pretty much. And so he said, I can go back and watch this later, and get the details. But I don't know. I don't understand plumbing well enough to ask the right questions, honestly.
Well, Holly, you can't be worse than
He
me
knows how things
saying
work. I don't.
you can't be worse than me saying what's it look like. Go ahead,
Well, I
Dan.
didn't know what a bulkhead was. I was asking Scott about, is that a bulkhead? Yes.
Go ahead,
Well,
Dan.
the difference between a round tank and a square tank or a rectangular tank, and you can see here in the picture, I've got some, and I've used them, but the round tank has an even amount of flow with no dead spots. And when you try to do the same thing in a rectangular or square tank, it's much more difficult. You're going to have dead spots. You're going to have turbulence because it's not perfectly shaped, but it can still work. Um, what I would do in most of my systems that were rectangular is I would have the water coming in the front. I don't have a picture of the top of it here, but the water would coming in would drop right straight down in the tank, and I would put an airline on the back so that it was raising water up in the back. And I wasn't getting a horizontal movement, but I was getting more of a vertical rotation of the water, which would move stuff around. But it doesn't do near as well as keeping the bottom of the tank clean. The round tanks will do much better at that because of the horizontal flow. And to me, the horizontal flow is better because it's more similar to what the fry encounter in the wild. In the wild, they don't have any type of Kreisel type flow. They're basically they're programmed to go up to the surface and feed, and the round tanks allow them to do that.
Gotcha. And I saw, Kevin, you sent in the comments, it was a while ago, but something about it breaks surface tension just in case there are fatty acids building up on the surface. Absolutely. Okay, guys, what other questions? Alrighty then. That settles that. Any
I want to
questions?
point out,
Go ahead, Kevin.
everything that Dan has in this photo is easily bleached, right? So as soon as all his animals are out, you can just pour whatever sanitizer of his choice in there. Maybe he's removing the canister filter, but everything else is pretty much plastic or vinyl, and everything can be sanitized. You're basically killing any algae that's in those clear tubes as well, and you can then remove the sanitizer or neutralize the sanitizer and dry out the system and start again, really, and then plummet through the through the threaded plumbing, change the system to. So ultimately, is like really really simple. That's another
Yes.
reason for going with that plastic media as well, and maybe that's a laundry basket with different types of polyfoam in it. So.
A dollar store wastebasket with a dollar store colander on top and
Right.
bio balls underneath and blue bonded media and a 100 micron filter sock. You're correct. The way that between every batch of fry, we bleach the system. And once it's been bleached, we neutralize it, we drain it, and then we refill it and put in new pre-cycled media and put fry in, and away we go.
Mhm. K1 media is extremely inexpensive also. And I mean, very inexpensive.
Yeah, one metric you can use to Cheryl's point is just surface area per dollar or dollar per surface area, whatever metric works for you. So when you shop for that type of media, you'll get this shape has this much surface area, and so you need this many individual shapes to cover a wall worth of surface area, that kind of thing. So when Dan mentioned that the quantity that you see there or in the previous photo can remove the nitrates or the ammonia and convert it all over, it's the efficiency of that media is based on basically how much surface area it has per volume. And so, it looks like not that much, but that might be, a good room's wall surface area amount of space for bacteria to grow on. So.
Yep. And just to reiterate, Dan, in the sump, the way you did it is you had holes. You explained it already. I won't make you explain it again. But the media down there, it's not actually like plumbed in. It's just the water's running through it, right?
That is correct. What's
Okay.
happening is the water is entering the top of the water jug,
Yeah.
and I have it flow high enough that it's churning. If you look at the picture, you can see some of it down at the bottom.
Yeah.
So what it's doing is it's constantly turning that media. That media is designed to be constantly churned, if you will, so it exfoliates the old bacteria, new bacteria grows. And I just noticed in this picture, that's an old pump in there. That was I can't remember the name of it now, but that was a AC pump that I had running at that time
Mhm.
Right.
that handled the whole system.
Wow, that's crazy. But yeah, I was just saying because I know some of the guys that are going to be setting up, they won't be fry tubs or anything, but they'll be using the high tech stuff that you have to hook up. So we'll have to get them in here sometime to show. But this system works well, obviously.
Well, it was, as Kevin pointed out, it was designed to be simple,
Yep.
and it, troubleshooting was extremely easy. There wasn't a lot to go wrong, and if something did go wrong, it was an easy fix. And it was easy enough that my wife, who knew nothing about plumbing, knew where the problem was as soon as there was a problem.
Nice. And what problems did you ever have with this system? Like,
Well, not many. Occasionally there was, most of the problems were, I would test it for leaks ahead of time, but usually it's a pump failure or it's a clog filter or, clog standpipe or something like that. Um, we had to watch the standpipes, the sleeve over the standpipes when we had a lot of fry in the system with a lot of food because they would have a tendency to get dirty quicker.
Yep.
And that was easily, maintained by simply changing them more often.
Mhm. And in the glass tank, in the square glass tanks, when you did those, you actually drilled them yourself, right? Because those were just 20 gallons, right?
Yeah, I probably drilled over 200 tanks over the course of the time. And it's really simple if you buy the bit and go slow.
Mhm.
Out of the 200 or so tanks that I drilled, I only broke two.
Nice. And same setup with the standpipe, the sleeve, same thing, right?
Identical. In fact, in the beginning, we went with all glass tanks, and it wasn't until later that we went with round tanks. We managed to um, get some from what the heck was the name of it? ORA and the other company that was up there. They had a bunch of stuff they were selling off, and we bought a couple of tubs and tried them and experimented with them and found out quickly that they worked better. And then we switched to all round tubs.
Hi, I'm trying to go back through the questions real quick. How do you feel about octagon tanks?
Most of the time with the octagon tanks, I generally don't like them because of the way they're designed. Most of your small octagon tanks are tall and narrow, and they're difficult to get good flow and good turnover. They have a tendency to um, can easily become stagnant at the bottom if you don't have them set up correctly. I just found that unless they're drilled, they're much harder to work with. Um,
Gotcha.
if they made a wide, shallow octagon tank, I think it would work perfectly fine.
Gotcha. And I would say too, anyone who's currently, I wish Nicole was here tonight, but anyone who's currently doing frying using smaller tanks and swapping them out and stuff, which is another way to do it. But this looks like a lot of, oh my gosh, technical, you got to plumb it. But Dan just explained how to do it and it ends up being so much easier. You do less work on a daily. I mean, but you do still have to like wipe the tubs and all that, right, Dan?
Yeah, but I'll tell you, when I first started, I knew nothing about plumbing,
Hmm.
and it was really easy. I mean, PVC is so forgiving, and it's relatively cheap. So, you get in there and cut a couple cuts and do a couple gluings and find out what goes where and how, and it's really pretty simple to work with.
Absolutely. And Jerry made has asked a good question. Bleach clean every 3 to 4 months. And guys, remember when Dan's answering, he was a production facility. So go ahead, answer Dan.
What's the question?
He
Well,
asked, "Do you
to help to
bleach?"
help
Huh?
Dan's like get some things like Dan, are you keeping the same size of Seahorse in each system, or are you allowing the Seahorse to grow within that same system and just controlling the density of Seahorse? Because I guess Jerry's question is, are you just, oh, it's been 2 months, I need to sterilize this system, and obviously you're doing all in all out aquaculture, but what's the frequency of you removing the animals, and therefore what's the frequency that you're bleaching or cleaning the system?
Thank you, sir.
Generally speaking, is once we're done with that batch of fry in that system, we move them to bigger tanks and grow out tanks in a system like this. The 90-gallon tubs, we can take them from newborn to cellar size and leave them in the same tub. Um, Once the tub has been emptied, then we bleach it. We don't take everything out and bleach it unless we're having a problem. Um, One of the tricks to do when you are having a problem with fry is to remove the fry completely out of a system and put them into a new system that's clean.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes that's enough to curtail what's going on. Usually I'm getting into other stuff now, but around a formalin, because normally the two biggest problems you're going to have are going to be bacteria or ciliates. And if it's a ciliate problem, moving them to a clean new system is the easiest way to attack it.
So it is your advice now that not to have everything going into the same sump. It's better to have a separate
Well, if I got
in case.
multiple, yeah,
Yeah.
on a system like this, the purpose of this particular system was, in the beginning we did multiple tanks. We'd have up to 10 30-gallon tanks on a row, and the reason we did that is because we kept having to split them up as they got bigger and bigger and bigger, but that meant 10 more tanks to clean instead of one. It's easier for me to substitute those 10 30-gallon tanks with one 90-gallon round tank, and it holds them just fine. So in the end, you can get a higher density in the round tanks than you can the rectangular tanks.
So if Holly's trying to
Okay.
get, go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead with Holly.
No, I was just gonna say. So in Holly's case, where she's having these fry constantly, how many should she set up to
It
start off?
depends on how many batches she wants to work on.
So it's user choice. Gotcha. What were you gonna ask, Kevin?
Oh, I just want to comment off after Ray. So Ray is reminding Jerry here in the comments that by bleaching the system or sanitizing the system, yes, you're killing all of the biological filtration. And I know this is a plumbing and hardware talk, but
No, go ahead.
Dan did mention that he's bringing in new media that's already seeded. So somewhere else he has a completely other system that he's giving. He's talked to us about this in the past, that he's dosing with ammonia. He's bringing in that new bio filtration into the system to seed this system. So potentially all he has to do is just change the bio balls or the K1 media in here to reestablish this and then get that system ramped up again. And then hopefully there's a drying step in there too. So he's adding new salt water.
And Dan, and great point. No problem that it's plumbing. That's part of, that's really important. And Dan, you actually bleach the K1 media too, right? And just have more seeded that you put in?
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood. All right, guys. Well, what other questions do we have? Is there any other
While
pictures?
this photo,
Go ahead.
hey, while this photo is up, I just want to point out here. So Dan has ball valves on these systems, and he actually you can see where this koi bowl is that he had probably 3 rectangle tanks there. And so he's using two, the left and right returns for that koi ball, but he's capped off that middle one just with a threaded insert to go into the top of that ball valve and to cap it off, and he has that turned off. So there's an extra point of redundancy there. He doesn't have to have that threaded cap on the end, but he does have it just in case it gets turned. It doesn't leak everywhere. And then I noticed here too, Dan has like some sort of mesh, I imagine mesh over the return into that blue poly pad. That's another mechanical trap that he's using to block
Yeah, when you have a fry
food from
system,
coming back.
you're correct. When you have a fry system and at nighttime when you're flushing it, you're trying to flush all the artemia out. So we're using a filter sock to catch the uneaten artemia in the sock instead of just really junking up the sump.
Absolutely. What else you noticed, Kevin?
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, I mean, it's good enough for anyone to build. Like, this is achievable. What you see here is achievable for a hobbyist. In a garage, be mindful of your temperature control, obviously, or a basement. And I was going to ask Dan kind of what are the specs of this canister filter. Obviously, it's not. There's salt water going through it, and I think your whole point of that canister filter is to block any food from going back or being emaciated or mechanically broken down.
Yeah, in this particular picture, it's a blue filter, so that's a 20 micron. We ended up going to 5 micron filters to remove as much of the organic material that was floating in the water as possible. We tried going with 1 micron, but 1 micron generally doesn't make 24 hours, where the 5 microns, we could change them daily and not, get too clogged up and slow up the flow too much. And that's just a simple canister, much like you'd see on an RO system, except the inlet and the outlet are larger diameter. Those are 3/4 in, 3/4 out. And then I also had some that were much larger, but these worked for the systems that we were doing. The filters were cheaper to go with the 10-inch filters than to go with the big boy filters or the 20-inch filters. And they were also very easy to clean.
Yeah, when Holly looks at this, Holly, you can buy those empty canisters like that from online retailers or ask your LFS. And also note that he has ball valves on either side of that. And so, potentially even without the DC pump, with an AC pump, because he has that T before the canister filter, he can close off the ball valve, go into the canister filter, and the water automatically gets diverted into the K1 media. You can
I was
close the,
checking that out because I haven't used a filter like that before, the canister filter thing.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah, he
years
does.
ago when I had a tank, I didn't have a sump and I had the canister filter where you have to put like filter pads and then the bio balls or fluval media, you know, all the different layers of stuff in there. But I've never used an actual, it looks almost like a jar and then there's like what, filter floss in there or what exactly
It's
is that?
actually a pleated filter, if I recall correctly, isn't it,
Yeah.
Dan?
People that have a well often have a pleated filter after their pump. And this is basically the same type of setup. It's just it happens to be a, a small 10-inch filter that's, you know, the ones on you'll find on a well pump are typically, I think, 4-inch. And this is a, oh, I can't remember if it's 4 or 6 or whatever, but this is a little bit smaller than that. Um, but it's pleated filters. I tried using the wound filters and I tried using some other filters, but I went with the pleated filters because they captured what I needed them to capture, and they were, I could, uh, after taking it apart, I could bleach them and reuse them. And the reason I have a ball valve on each side of it is that when I want to change the filter, I turn the valves off, unscrew the filter, put a new one in, open up the valves, and away I go. Without the ball valves, even if I turn the pump off, the water would just flow back and I'd have a big, you know, unless I had a bucket catching all the water, it was a mess. So,
There's still
um,
some, right, yeah, yeah.
And I think, I mean, Kevin asked it, and I'm pretty sure you covered it, but what was that about? How when you adjust the ball valve because of your T, it goes back into the K1 media?
right. My early design, I came out of the pump, went to a T. One side went to the K1 media, the other side went to the tanks, and and that went through the filter and then to the tanks. Later on, I redesigned it so that all the water went through, coming out of the pump, went through the canister filter. Then there was a T going to the K1 and to um, the tanks. And the reason for that is that during the daytime there was such low flow, not much water was being filtered by the canister,
Uh,
and by switching it around, I got more filtration from the canister. It clogged up much faster, which meant I was removing more organics. Um,
gotcha. So from the pump to the canister, then after that, it tees off K1 media up to tank.
yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, if that,
Now,
In
the
that
other
case,
thing I'd like to point out is that if you'll notice on the end of that, you know, the way I had it plumbed, instead of having two 90s on the very end, I put a hose. And the reason for that
oh
is
yeah,
that each time you have a 90, you're going to slow up your flow. And by creating that U-shaped hose, that had a minimal effect that where two 90s would have slowed up the flow a lot more.
gotcha. What were you gonna say,
Whenever
Kevin?
wondering.
possible, whenever possible, I don't like to use 90s. I prefer to use sweeps, but sweeps can be difficult to put in place.
I was just going to ask Dan. Then your methods changed, Dan, right? So once you plumb the filter just directly downstream of the pump, you're having to turn off the pump in order to change the filter, right? You're not just leaving it on.
No, I don't, because it's such a short duration that I don't turn off the pump.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it takes me 10 seconds to change it, so I don't bother. If you look
Oh,
at
so this is that new design. Yeah.
yes, in this picture, you'll see that the pump's here, and you have a flexible hose coming up to the one side of the canister. Water comes through, and then the T is immediately after the canister to where it goes back to the K1 media or up to the tanks. And what I found by doing this is my sump stayed much cleaner this way because I was filtering more stuff out.
You know, that looks horribly dirty to begin with, Dan.
Right.
That's just a disgrace, right?
I don't think so.
It's been running for months.
Man. Well, that's the way to do
Holly,
it. Go ahead.
I
Well,
just
if
want to
you,
say, Holly,
I
the
want to,
pleated
I want to,
filter is Pleated, like pleated pants.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just the folded one. Yeah.
No, I've seen them. I've seen them, but I have never used them. But I have seen them.
Kevin, if you were to come here and visit when I was in full production, or if you were to stop in and visit Alyssa, I think you would see a universal theme in terms of our attitude and the way the systems have to be for seahorses to survive. They've got to
Yep.
be kept clean.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to see.
And you know, there's actually a lot of people who do come up with these cool designs, and MBI, Marine Breeding Initiative, is constantly having new people show new designs like this and plumbing that works for, you know, raising different. I saw Beeves is going to try dragons. Wow, that won't be fry, but still. Hey, one more question. Would you suggest this type of setup, Dan, for dwarfs, or is this just for fry and breeding? Like, because it's
I,
obviously not as pretty.
I'm going to answer that in just one second. One thing
Okay,
I want to
sorry.
point out before I
Sorry.
do that
Sure.
is in this picture, there is a major problem in this picture that nobody's picked up on yet.
Okay.
And that is in the protein skimmer. The
Skimmer's
intake
over
for the
there.
protein skimmer is up against the glass.
Yep.
And that was turned later, but in that particular picture, that is a problem. For the dwarfs, I used a 65-gallon round tub, which I filled up roughly halfway. And, you know, there's two of them. You can see in the top left corner, there's another one. And I would put about a half a dozen to a dozen dwarfs in a tank like this. And I would feed them Artemia. I would put in some live mysids. And in about 3 months, I would have about 200 or 300 dwarfs in a tank. Um, and then once I got the population up, I'd start pulling from them to sell. And then I would start the process over in the other tank. I'd put up, you know, half a dozen to a dozen and just turn them loose for 3 months. And I'd have the same production. And that system ran nonstop for about 6 or 7 years before I pulled it down.
Jeez, that's crazy. And I mean, I love the idea, guys. He mentioned it again. He talked a bit about it on another episode, but he used live mysids as cleanup crew in a dwarf tank. I just think that's so cool. I would never have thought of it. I mean, anyways, but for a hobbyist that's not trying to like breed dwarfs, you would probably say, nah, just go with what do you advise for that?
Well, if you're feeding the dwarfs properly, the dwarfs are going to breed anyway.
Right.
And because of the setup, if the setup is where the dwarfs will survive correctly, then your population of dwarfs should slowly increase. And if you're doing things correctly, really well, they should rapidly increase to where the point where you're going, oh my God, what do I do with all these? You should be giving dwarfs away.
Right. So
If
don't
you look
keep
at this
dwarfs.
picture,
Just
if
kidding.
you look at this picture, I don't know if you can see it on the screen there, but there's a ton of them that are hitched all over the place along the bottom of this, over here. You know, they're hitched in other places, but um, there's probably over 100 dwarfs or more in that picture right there.
Now, Dan, do you want, the absolute numerical value of the flow to be different, but the behavior of the dwarfs to be similar? You don't want them to be fighting for staying upright, but you still want them to be in some flow?
Yeah, keeping dwarfs, if somebody can keep dwarfs correctly, they should be able to be able to raise fry. And likewise, if you can raise fry, you should be able to keep dwarfs. The habitat is very much, very, very, very similar, and the needs are very similar.
That's why
They're
it's
eating the
always so.
same food.
I'm so sorry. That's why it
That's right.
always worries me when people say, "Oh, well, I don't want to go to all this hassle, so I'm going to get a small tank with dwarfs." And I'm like, "Oh no, no, really, no, that's not the case." But
If I was going to set up a dwarf tank, I would have probably a 5 or 10 gallon tank
Mhm.
with an overflow and built-in overflow system, and I'd probably have a 20-gallon sump.
So basically, the sump setup you just showed us, something like that. But 5 to 10. You said 5 to 10 to 20.
I would, if I was just going to set up, for display purposes, it'd probably be a 5 to 10.
5 to 10.
Now,
Okay.
now I will say this: if I put it in my living room, I'd probably also buy me a set of binoculars so I sit in the easy chair, I can look at them.
Right. I've never understood the fascination with dwarfs, but I mean, to those who love them, they're cool. Whatever. All right, Kevin. What other questions you got? You're asking the good ones. We tap Kevin out.
In the photo that you have up here, Dan, there's I don't see any air line, and nor do I see any real water movement on the bottom directly. It looks like you have the water coming in the top, and you have the collection cup on the top as well. How are you ensuring not only flow on the bottom, but the removal of the leftover food from the bottom?
I don't know why there's an airline is not in this picture, but normally I had an airline in the tank. And when I was doing the dwarfs, I didn't have the sweeps at that time. I was just doing an air stone. Um, but I usually had one on one side of the tank, just to bring water up from the bottom. And I usually had it rowing at a pretty good rate, enough so that I would end up with salt creep all over the area.
Mm, gotcha. And did we even cover why the airline was important? I think we did. That was your comment about the surface, right?
Yeah, you want to
Yeah.
break the
Okay.
surface tension, and you also want to turn the water over. The problem with this tank, this particular design, is that you got water coming in from the top, turning it, and then the water that's exiting the tank is from the top. So
Right.
you really need an airline or some type of means of churning the water so that you don't have stagnation at the bottom.
Yeah, it looks like you're, I'm not going to say the right word, but it looks like you have it pointed more down than you typically do in the fry tubs, but I hear you. Gotta have an airline.
Well, in this particular one, we left the 90-degree on one side, and the other
Mm,
side is straight.
gotcha.
And that's because at nighttime, just like with the fry systems, we would turn the flow up
Hmm. Gotcha.
to flush out the artemia.
Well, you're also running oxidators in there that are going to help turn it over also.
For those who are wondering what the oxidators are, those are little peroxide devices. They have a reactor in them, and you put peroxide in there, and it slowly releases minute amount of peroxide in the water.
And where's that at? Where?
These little, there's three of them underneath the standpipe, and there's another one
Oh, I
over here.
see. Okay.
I'm glad. I was going to ask what those were.
Yeah, I was real big into the oxidators for a while. I still liked them in the end, but I had a problem getting them. And
Mm,
they're German made. They're not, they're found more often in freshwater tanks. But the reason I liked them was because the releasing of the peroxide into the water in minute amounts would oxidize organic matter in the water column.
so cool. And do you still use, is peroxide a part of your routine? I know that's not plumbing, but just out of curiosity.
I've played around with peroxide. The problem is that unless you have a dosing machine and know how to do it correctly, you know, I found the human element was not accurate enough or consistent enough for it to work properly.
Absolutely.
You,
And
you
I've,
have to go with low dosing because if you go with too high a dosing with peroxide, you will eat up your biological bacteria.
and you said on this dwarf system though, you weren't doing the, switch them out and bleach the tank. They stayed in that for 6 years and everything worked out. You were just cleaning them and that's it, right? Cleaning
Well,
it.
what we would do is once we finished using one tank, we would drain that tank and scrub it, and then put new water in. Um, we didn't actually bleach it. Now, there was a time or two where we did bleach it, but we could because all we had to do, and you got to be careful doing this because it's connected to a system, but we could turn the flow off and turn everything off, bleach the tank, scrub it down, drain it, or dechlorinate it, drain it, and refill it.
Hmm.
That option was there, but it did not do anything for the sump. And of course, you have another tank on there, so there's a minimal effect in doing that because as soon as you turn the system back on, whatever's in the other tank in the sump is back into that tank.
Gotcha. All right. Any other questions before I jump to the few in the comments? Anything else you want to point out there, Kevin or Holly? Anything you feel free to say? What's that black thing?
Yeah, I'm glad you point. I was wondering what those were.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I know I've missed some of your questions, Jerry. I'm sorry. I think we pretty much covered flow for dwarfs. Just really quickly, if you were not doing a production type system and you were just trying to set up a display tank, you've already said 5 to 10 gallon, 20 gallon sump, have all the media down there. And I've noticed like with dwarfs, just like fry, people don't want to keep a lot of rock or any of that crap in there because why?
Well, dwarfs are susceptible to many of the things that come in with live rock,
Mm,
whether it be hydroids or little crabs or what have you. Most people that are most successful with dwarfs usually go with kind of a sterile system where it's bare bottom, artificial hitches, um, easy to clean, very low risk in adding things in there that can harm the dwarfs.
Has anybody here, not just Dan, but anybody here, sorry for everybody that's kind of had to listen to me talk to him, but is anybody here known someone that did a dwarf tank with sand and rock and whatever that was successful past, say,
Yes,
okay, tell me
yes.
about it.
Yeah, I know of somebody who set up a 40-gallon breeder and did it as a planted tank with a bunch of macros and
Mm,
put a couple of dwarfs in, and it was pretty much a self-sustaining tank to a large degree. But the key to that was is that you could only have a very small amount of dwarfs per the area,
uh,
so it didn't make a very good display tank because you couldn't find the dwarfs.
right.
Um,
Your
you
binoculars.
know,
Wasn't that,
Put
Dan,
on your
wasn't that
reading glasses.
massage?
what's
Wasn't
that?
that, wasn't that massage up in the Seattle area?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, the flip side is if you want to see the dwarfs, you got to have a smaller tank where you can find them, and you need to have it open where you can see them. Otherwise, it's a cool system, but you're just not going to see the animals. I used to
Yeah.
get a kick when I used to go to the Smithsonian Institute locally, and they had a 1,500-gallon estuary tank from the lagoon, and they had two erectus in there, and the erectus in there were probably somewhere between 7 to 9 inches. They were big, and every time we went in there with my wife and the kids, we would go and we'd stand in front of that tank for 10 or 15 minutes to find the two erectus. And, they had a rock wall in the back, and, they had plants, and they had everything that was in the lagoon was in that tank.
Nice.
And it literally took 10 or 15 minutes searching that tank to find them, because if they were hitched and holding still, they blended in and they were just hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I remember about her males too is it seems like most of the people I talk to, their males produce 7, 8, sometimes 12 offspring. And she was getting broods from her males with the 40-gallon setup where she was getting 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the knock on the dwarfs is that for most people, when they set up a dwarf tank, regardless of the setup, if they're not feeding them properly,
Yes.
after about 3 to 6 months, the production of fry will drop
Yep.
off significantly.
Yep.
And the real key to being successful with dwarf seahorses is to get a very good enrichment to use with the artemia and feed them only enriched artemia. If you feed them newly hatched all the time, you're going to find that they're going to stop breeding, and your production is going to drop way off.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And that's a topic that we will be covering soon. We just want to make sure we cover it well. So Artemia is still coming, guys, but not yet.
You
Speaking
wonder
of
why
which,
I don't keep dwarfs.
what?
I said, you wonder why I don't keep dwarfs.
Right. I was going to try it just because it seems like so many people are fascinated by them and want them. But yeah, it's like if I'm going to do these kind of systems, then I want to have fry that I'm raising. So, but to
There's a,
each
there's
their
a
own.
there's a lot of people who say they're successful with dwarfs,
Right.
and that's true for a period of time. But try to find somebody who's kept dwarfs for 3 or 4 years
Years.
successfully without having to restock. That is extremely difficult to find. Very few people are successful long term with dwarfs, and as much as I hate to say it, I don't think they're really a good specimen that's really suitable for the hobby because of that. Most people that buy dwarfs end up buying them because they're smaller.
Yep.
They can do a smaller system, and on the surface, they think they're going to be cheaper, and they're not willing to spend, you know, because of that, they're typically not willing to spend what they need to spend to do everything correctly.
Gotcha.
I
They're better
had
off getting
yours for a
buscus or
little
something like
while.
that.
Mine lasted like maybe a month or something like
Right.
that. And the
Well,
place I got them from, it was many, many years ago, was in Florida. And they, along with it, I got like sea lettuce and snails and, things to go along with them. And they ended up being killed by hydroids within probably a few weeks because of all the other stuff that was with them brought in hydroids, I think.
well, hydroids are a problem. The other problem is that most people, you know, very few people will buy books and study a subject before they do it. And anybody that's going to use Artemia should study, you know, the ins and outs of Artemia or baby brine shrimp before they do it, because it's very easy with repetitive uses to set up a system where you're breeding brine shrimp and they just end up becoming so bacterial laden
Yep.
that you end up with, bacterial enteritis in the fry or the dwarfs, and you just lose them.
Mhm.
We got to cover it, guys, soon, because that is the key to everything for darn sure. You're right. Who was talking? Someone was.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, because they say, oh, you hatch the brine shrimp for them and just feed them. Nobody talked about enriching them, or yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a lot of education about it. They
Well, we
weren't
did.
very easy to take care of.
Yep, and we did do a couple of videos about that. I'll try to link them when we're done because Dan has shared and shared and shared all of his wonderful expertise and so have all of you actually shared what's worked for you and stuff. That's why I love this. But it's
For,
going.
for us as a commercial breeder, dwarfs were the one product that we really hated selling because, you know, the the success rate was so low. You just felt like you were sending them off to their doom.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Well, everybody thinks that they're going to be easy because they're little and they're not accepting the fact that they've got to continually raise live food. They've got to enrich it. They've got to maintain the tank quality because you're adding crap into the tank with the enriched brine shrimp. And they're actually more work than the larger species in the long run.
Mhm.
Yep. The larger specimens are much easier to keep.
For sure. And that's what the thing I was thinking of. We actually covered. We have a Wine Wednesday dwarf tank set up, so go look that up. But guys, I'm running low on steam. It's 10 o'clock. So any final questions that I missed or anything that you guys want to add? Doesn't have to be all about plumbing. Go ahead. I always love when I ask a question and it's like dead silence.
No.
Well, we covered quite a bit. Dan, thank you so much for sharing your pictures. Cheryl, we didn't end up sharing any of yours because you beat us to it. But thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin, for asking such awesome questions. Sometimes I get, thanks for asking the nice questions. We'll just leave it there. Anyways, and I hopefully this has been helpful to everyone. If you have questions later, feel free to put them in the comment section. And Jerry, I think it was you that said way earlier that you posted pictures to my page. It's no excuses, but bottom line is that my family had our Christmas this week. So my Christmas is over, but this week was awful. So what are you showing us now, Dan?
Well, people ask about the flow with the fry.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
And in this picture here, you can see how I have the flow set up and what the fry are doing when I have it done correctly.
Exactly.
I don't know if you can see it on your end, but there's a lot of Artemia in there, and they're basically just kind of hovering into the flow and letting the Artemia come to them and feed.
Mhm.
They're not expending a lot of energy to stalk prey and capture it. And they also, if you watch them, some of the very front, over time, 15, 20 minutes, you'll see them slowly drift back and some of the others will move farther into the flow toward the front.
Yeah.
And so you can see them kind of changing positions very gradually as they're doing this.
I have something I want to bring up for people, and I kind of got the same effect in my 10-gallon going on with the way the fry behave. And the way I did it is by putting a bubble bar on one end of the tank. And if you put, the little valve that you can adjust the flow, you can adjust, the rate of the bubbles coming out and get, more flow or less flow. And that kind of helps circulate the water, in like a rectangle tank if you're just using a glass setup, I figured out.
Nice. Good tip.
You got one really big one in there compared to the others, Dan.
Yeah, there's always a couple of fast growers and a couple of slow growers in every batch.
There's one right there out to the right of the standpipe.
Yeah, I see it. I see it.
Well, also remember too that the position of where they are in the water column makes them look bigger and smaller than others too.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's true too.
And when you obviously it's different with, am I going to say that pelagic? How do you say it, Dan?
No, it's not really different. Not in this system. The difference is the foods you feed, not so much the mechanics of what goes on.
But in a pelagic system, do you have the zip ties and stuff for the first 2 weeks or whatever, or just no?
I don't bother the first 10 days,
Okay.
unless I just happen to just go ahead and set it up that way.
Okay.
But most of the time, they're not going to, if I'm dealing with Red-eye or Cuda or Holonis or something like that,
Mhm.
I know the first 10 days are not going to hitch, so I don't bother. Usually at around, after a week, somewhere between a week to 10 days, I'll start putting the hitches in. And usually somewhere between 10 and 14 days, they start hitching.
But with dwarfs or erectus, they need them from day one.
Yeah, well, sometimes erectus will go through a pelagic period of
Oh, really?
24, 48 hours.
Really?
And as long as they're pelagic, the light stays on 24/7, and I keep food in there.
Gotcha. Pelagic. That's how you say it. Thank you. Okay, guys. Mermaids Reef, I'm with you. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. I miss the fry. This whole one Wednesday, I'm like, I'm gonna go do this again. Darn it, because they're so cute and so fun. And when you do it right, you can be successful. I mean, Holly's
And
having
there's
success.
so much work.
Well, yeah, but
There's
still.
so much work they are.
I
Yeah,
know. I'm not gonna lie and say they're not, but still,
Yeah.
it's that feeling when you raise them. Like my little Cheryl. Someone asked me the other day if little Cheryl was still okay. Little Cheryl's rocking, and she's she was the first one I got to survive. So, anyways, if I missed your questions, apologize. Merry Christmas to anyone who celebrates, and Happy Holidays to everyone. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope you have a fantastic week. What topic next week, guys? Any suggestions? Anybody?
Everybody speak all at once.
What was it?
Everybody speak all at once.
I know. Every time I do that, I put you all on the spot, and you make me look like I put you all on the spot. We can if nobody has a request or suggestion, I can go back to the poll. Maybe do another one with the topics that we haven't covered yet. I know I have a few people that have asked for certain topics, so I can come up with something. I just thought I'd see if anybody had a request.
Well, we still keep putting off the brine shrimp.
I know, Dan. Anyway.
Well, that's because somebody needs to find the time to put everything together. I've got it partially done, and the other thing is I really need to get some good videos of me doing the process.
Right.
The way I'd like to do it is to have one week of all technical stuff about the ins and outs of it, and then have another one where I go through the process of what I do and explain why and how what I do, and then possibly a third one, but at least two different breakups of it.
And I think, am I correct in saying that the videos will actually be available even after Wine Wednesday because you're going to put them on?
Yes,
Your
once I do
YouTube, right.
yeah, those will be permanently available.
Yes. So once they get done, they're going to be great. But we don't want to push him. He's hard at work and he helps us every week. So I know I'm right there with you, Holly. Go ahead.
I've said I think that would be beneficial because I still hear a lot of people that are, oh, I have to enrich them.
Yep.
Kind of stuff, and that would be very helpful for a lot of people.
Agreed. All right, guys. Well, I am going to call it. I will definitely let you know what the topic is within the next few days. You guys go ahead and say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And cheers, y'all. Happy Wine Wednesday. Oh, I forgot to put my finger on the end.